Picture two companies. The first is superbly run, brilliant people, relentless work, a product customers genuinely love. Year after year, it barely scrapes by. The second is ordinary. Average managers, average effort, nothing special, and it quietly mints money decade after decade. Same economy, same talent pool, opposite fortunes. For a long time, business had one explanation for that gap. The winners were just better, smarter, hungrier. In the late 1970s, a young Harvard professor named Michael Porter looked at that answer and decided it was almost entirely wrong. Managers everywhere talked grandly about strategy, but when he looked closely, nobody actually had the tools to analyze one. They had war stories and gut feel. So Porter went hunting for the real machinery underneath, and he found 5 hidden forces that quietly decide who gets rich, plus one trap that destroys the companies who try to have it all. Here's what Porter noticed first, and it stung. Every company already has a competitive strategy, whether anyone wrote it down or not. It's the sum of 1,000 scattered decisions: what marketing pushes, what finance approves, what the factory quietly optimizes for. The trouble is, when each department just follows its own instincts, those instincts almost never add up to the best plan for the business as a whole. In the 1970s, strategic planning was the hottest phrase in every boardroom. Consultants sold it, executives swore by it. But Porter saw the emperor had no clothes. The field could ask big questions: where should we compete? How do we win? And offered almost nothing rigorous to answer them. The essence of the whole problem, he wrote, is relating a company to its environment. And the most important piece of that environment isn't the economy or the culture or luck. It's the one thing most managers treated as just background scenery: the industry itself. Because industries are not created equal, Porter laid 2 lists side by side. In one, tires, paper, steel, enormous, sophisticated industries where even the best-run firms fought for years just to earn a decent return. In the other, cosmetics, toiletries, oilfield services, where companies you'd never call brilliant threw off cash like a broken slot machine. The difference in profitability wasn't small, and it wasn't temporary. It persisted, industry after industry, decade after decade. And here is the sentence that reframes everything. The intensity of competition, Porter wrote, is neither a matter of coincidence nor bad luck. It's rooted in an industry's underlying economic structure. In other words, it isn't mainly how hard you row, it's which river you chose to row on. Some rivers carry you, some drown you, no matter how strong your arms. So the first real question of strategy isn't, how do we beat our rivals? It's, what kind of water are we even in? And to answer that, Porter did something no one had done cleanly before. He mapped the water. Competition, he argued, is never just you versus the company across the street. You're actually being squeezed by 5 forces at once. There are your existing rivals, yes, slugging it out on price and features, but there's also the threat of new competitors barging in the moment you look profitable. There's the quiet menace of substitute products, a completely different solution that makes yours irrelevant. There's the bargaining power of your buyers leaning on you to drop your price, and the bargaining power of your suppliers leaning on you to pay more. 5 forces pressing in from every side. Porter called it extended rivalry. The real competition is the whole crowd at the table, not just the player in the next seat. And the combined strength of those 5 forces, he said, sets a hard ceiling on the profit anyone in that industry can ever make. Structure first, everything else second. Start with the newcomers. If your industry is making easy money, the whole world can see it, and outsiders will pour in until the profit is competed away, unless something stops them. Porter called those somethings barriers to entry, and he cataloged them like a naturalist. Sheer scale. So a newcomer has to build a giant plan on day one just to compete. Fat capital requirements. Customers locked in by switching costs. A brand so trusted that no upstart can touch it. And the one nobody sees coming. Distribution. When Timex wanted to sell watches, the jewelry stores were sewn up by the incumbents. So Timex simply invented a new channel, hanging its cheap, reliable watches by the cash register in drugstores. Xerox did something slyer still. Instead of selling its copiers, it rented them, turning a purchase any rival could match into a capital wall almost nobody could climb. A moat isn't a nice-to-have. In Porter's world, a moat is the difference between a business and a charity. Now the rival's already inside the walls. Some industries compete like gentlemen. Others tear each other apart, and Porter wanted to know why. Slow growth turns competition into a knife fight, because the only way to grow is to steal someone else's customers. High fixed costs push everyone to slash prices just to keep the machines running. When products are all basically the same, price becomes the only weapon left. But the cruelest factor is the one that traps you: high exit barriers. Imagine a business bleeding money, and the rational move is to leave, but you can't. The specialized factory can't be sold. Union contracts, pride, a parent company's ego all nail you to the floor. So you stay, and you keep fighting, dragging everyone's profits down with you. Porter drew it as a simple 2x2, and the sweet spot leaps off the page. You want high barriers to entry and low barriers to exit. Easy to defend, easy to walk away. The worst industry on earth is the opposite. Anyone can enter, and no one can leave. Then come the squeezes. Above you sits a ceiling made of substitutes. And a substitute doesn't have to be a better version of your product. It just has to do the job. High fructose corn syrup didn't beat sugar on quality. It simply replaced it and capped what every sugar producer could ever charge. On either side of you sit two hands. Your buyers, when they're big and concentrated, squeeze your price down, the way a giant automaker squeezes a parts supplier, always dangling the threat that it could just make the part itself. Your suppliers, when they're powerful, squeeze your margins up. And Porter reminds us that your labor force is a supplier too. 5 forces, one relentless equation, and a shrewd tell buried in the analysis. Government is not a 6th force. Regulation, subsidies, tariffs, they matter enormously, but they work by changing the other 5. Diagnose all of it honestly, and you finally know the real question. Not, are we good? But, is this game even winnable? And if so, how? Diagnosis is only half the book, because once you truly see the forces, the obvious hope is to somehow beat all of them, to be everything to everyone. Porter's most famous, most bracing argument is that you can't. To defend yourself against those 5 forces, he said, a company has essentially 3 winning moves. Just 3. You can pursue overall cost leadership, become the ruthless low-cost producer, the one who still makes money when a price war breaks out. You can pursue differentiation, build something the whole industry perceives as unique, so buyers pay a premium and shrug at cheaper rivals. Or you can pursue focus. Pick one narrow slice of the market, one segment or region or product line, and serve it better than anyone who's trying to serve everybody. 3 generic strategies, each one a genuinely different way to build a defense. And here's the part that made managers uncomfortable. You have to actually pick one. Real commitment to a direction, not a wish list, a choice. Watch them work. Cost leadership. Briggs & Stratton grinding out small engines at a scale that gave it half the world market. Lincoln Electric, whose relentless efficiency in arc welding made it almost unattackable on price. These firms don't ignore quality, but low cost is the theme running through every single decision they make. Differentiation. Mercedes and Caterpillar, whose names alone let them charge more. Crown Cork and Seal, winning not on price, but on service, so responsive customers wouldn't dream of leaving. And focus. Martin Brower, which became one of the largest food distributors in America by deliberately serving only a handful of fast food chains, turning a narrow target into a fortress of low cost and deep loyalty at once. 3 roads, each one, walked with total commitment, leads to a defensible position, a spot where the 5 forces can push all they like and still can't crush your returns. But there's a 4th road, and it's the one most companies drift onto without ever deciding to. Porter gave that 4th road a name that became business folklore, stuck in the middle. It's the company that wants it all. Decent quality, but not premium. Competitive prices, but not the lowest. A broad market, but a special touch. It sounds reasonable. It sounds balanced. It is, Porter wrote, almost guaranteed low profitability. Because the low-cost player will always undercut you. The differentiator will always out-specialize you. The focused firm will always outserve your best customers. You're too expensive to win on price and too generic to command a premium. Caught in the crossfire, bleeding from both sides. He pointed to Clark Equipment and forklift trucks. squeezed lifeless between the low-cost giants and the specialists. Plot an industry's profits against market share, he showed, and you often get a U. The big cost leaders thrive on the right, the sharp-focused players thrive on the left, and the firms marooned in the middle sit at the very bottom of the curve. Trying to please everyone is not a safe, moderate strategy. It's the most dangerous position on the board. And even a clear choice is never permanent, which is Porter at his most sobering. Every one of the three strategies carries the seed of its own destruction. Cost leadership? Ask Ford. In the 1920s, Ford's fanatical low-cost machine, the mighty Model T, was the wonder of the age, until General Motors offered variety in colors and models, and the world Ford had built froze him in place. His greatest strength became the cage he couldn't escape. Differentiation? It works right up until buyers get sophisticated enough to stop caring, or an imitator gives them 90% of the magic for half the price, the way Kawasaki came at Harley-Davidson and Triumph. Even focus can collapse if the little niche you defended suddenly grows big enough to attract the giants. A strategy, Porter insists, is not a trophy you win once. It's a position you have to keep earning as the ground shifts under your feet, which raises the next question. If the ground keeps shifting, how do you see the other players moving before they move? This is the half of the book everyone forgets, and it might be the most useful. Structure tells you about the industry, but you also have to outthink specific rivals, and Porter built a framework to get inside a competitor's head. 4 questions. First, what are their future goals? What are they really trying to achieve? Which tells you how satisfied they are and how hard they'll fight. Second, what are their assumptions? The things they believe about themselves and the industry that might be gloriously, exploitably wrong. Third, what's their current strategy? What are they actually doing right now? And fourth, what are their capabilities? What can they truly pull off, and what can't they? Put those 4 together, and you get what Porter called a response profile, a genuine prediction of how a rival will react before you poke them. Where are they vulnerable? What move would provoke the most vicious retaliation? The one to avoid? Most companies study their competitors the way we study the weather. Porter taught them to study rivals the way a chess player studies an opponent. And rivals, it turns out, are constantly talking, if you know how to listen. Porter called it market signals. Any action a competitor takes that hints at its intentions. A price change. A sudden press release announcing a factory it hasn't built yet. A new fighting brand launched right next to yours. Some signals are honest warnings. Back off. This is our turf. Others are pure bluff. Theater meant to scare you out of a move you were about to make. The skill is telling the difference, reading the poker table for the tell behind the bet. A rival who announces a huge expansion months early might be genuinely committing, or might be praying you'll cancel your own plans so neither of you has to build. Every move, Porter showed, carries a message. The naive player only sees the move. The strategist reads the message underneath it and answers not the action, but the intention behind it. So how do you actually attack or defend? Making a competitive move, Porter wrote, is a combination of whatever brute force the firm can muster, applied with finesse. Raw power alone gets you a price war that everybody loses. Finesse means shaping what your rivals believe about what you'll do. And the single most important concept in the whole dance, he argued, is commitment. Not commitment as a pep talk word, commitment as a strategic weapon. If you can convince your rivals, credibly, that you will absolutely defend a market to the death, you often never have to fight at all. They simply stay away. The most powerful move is sometimes the one you make so visibly and so irreversibly that no sane competitor tests it. But commitment cuts both ways, because it can also freeze you. For years, IBM hesitated to build the mini computers it easily could have, terrified of cannibalizing its own beloved mainframes. The very thing you've committed to can become the thing you're afraid to disrupt. Strength and blindness, Porter kept showing, are often the same trait wearing 2 faces. Now a puzzle that had nagged economists for years. Within a single industry, why are some firms permanently more profitable than others? Not for a lucky quarter, but for decades? Porter's answer was one of his most elegant ideas: strategic groups. Inside any industry, companies cluster into groups that play the same basic game. In appliances, a General Electric competing broadly on scale lives in a different world than a Maytag charging premium prices for premium reliability. which lives in a different world than a bare-bones private label maker. And around each group stands a wall, Porter called a mobility barrier, the thing that stops a firm in one group from simply hopping into a more profitable one. Maytag can't become GE overnight. The low-cost maker can't buy Maytag's reputation with a check. Those walls are exactly why the profit gaps inside an industry don't close. It isn't that some managers are lazy, it's that they're standing in different rooms of the same building, and the doors between them are heavier than they look. But no map stays accurate forever, and Porter refused to let strategy freeze into a snapshot. Industries evolve, barriers rise and crumble, buyers grow powerful, then complacent. The whole structure you so carefully diagnosed is quietly rearranging itself while you plan. For decades, managers leaned on one comfortable tool to predict all this: the product life cycle, the tidy curve from birth to growth to maturity to decline. Porter called it, with a professor's polite dagger, the grandfather of concepts, and then showed why you can't trust it alone. Real industries don't march in neat stages. Some skip maturity entirely. Some, left for dead, roar back to life. The life cycle tells you that change happens, but not why or when, and when is the only thing a strategist actually needs. So Porter replaced the comforting curve with something harder and more honest. Watch the forces themselves shift, and you can see the future of your industry taking shape while your rivals are still staring at last year's chart. Which is why the middle of the book fans out into a gallery of worlds, each with its own rules. There are fragmented industries, no leader, thousands of small players, where the whole game is finding a way to gain scale nobody else has cracked. There are emerging industries, brand new and formless, where the winner is often the one who best tolerates sheer uncertainty and helps write the rules before they harden. There's the wrenching transition to maturity, when the growth that hid everyone's mistakes suddenly stops, and firms that thrived on momentum have to relearn how to compete on cost and service. There are declining industries, Porter's chilling endgame, where the smart questions are which rivals will leave, and whether you should be the last one standing, quietly retire, harvest the business for cash, or get out first. And there are global industries, where your position in Japan silently decides whether you can win in Germany. One book, many battlefields. The forces are the same everywhere, but the winning move never is. And then the biggest decisions of all, the ones that reshape the company itself. Should you vertically integrate, swallow your supplier or your distributor, and do in-house what you used to buy? It looks like control, and Porter warns it's often a trap of hidden costs and lost flexibility dressed up as strategy. Should you expand capacity? Build the new plant? In commodity industries, he shows an almost tragic pattern. Everyone, acting perfectly rationally, builds at once, floods the market, and drowns together in overcapacity. And should you enter a whole new business? Here, Porter delivers the coldest line in the book. If markets truly work, he argues, then the price of buying into an attractive industry already reflects how attractive it is. So simply buying a good company and a good industry can never, by itself, earn you an above-average return. You don't get rich buying what's obviously valuable. You get rich seeing the value before the market does. Every grand strategic bet, in the end, comes back to the same discipline. Not, is this exciting, but what does the structure really say? Step back and look at what this quiet, technical book actually did. Before it, strategy was anecdotes and charisma. After it, strategy had an anatomy. 5 forces, 3 strategies, strategic groups, a way to read a rival's mind. Porter's 5 forces became the most taught framework in the history of business, drilled into nearly every MBA on earth. Consulting firms were built on it. And when Porter looked back, 18 years later, he wrote something that captures why it lasted. In some ways, everything has changed. New technologies, new industries, new giants. But in another sense, nothing has changed. The framework works precisely because it reaches beneath the surface, past whatever is fashionable this decade, down to the permanent structure of how competition works. The Model T is a museum piece. The forces that toppled it are still operating right now in whatever industry you happen to be in, including the one where a mediocre company is quietly getting rich while a brilliant one wonders what it's doing wrong. Remember those 2 companies we started with, the great one that couldn't make money, the ordinary one that couldn't stop. The whole book is the answer to that riddle. and it comes down to a single shift in how you see the world. Success was never mainly about how hard you compete. It's about where, which industry, which position, which of the three roads you commit to, and how deliberately you choose it instead of drifting into the fatal middle. Structure decides the ceiling. Your position decides where you stand beneath it. That's the discipline hiding inside all 400 dense pages. Stop asking, how do we work harder than our rivals? And start asking, have we chosen a game we can actually win? Porter left one line that lands like a compass. A strategic position, he wrote, is a path, not a fixed location. You're never trapped, but you're never finished either. So here's the question to sit with tonight. In your work, in your business, in your own career, are you competing harder, or have you actually chosen where to compete? If this reframed how you see the game, watch our breakdown of Blue Ocean Strategy next, the book that asks what happens when you stop fighting inside Porter's forces and go invent a whole new sea.